This is the SEGA Genesis MINI Model 2, which is a replica of the actual SEGA Genesis MINI 2 that came out in the 90s, which I had, so this is pretty exciting for me. But look how tiny the box is. It's super tiny. This is the SEGA Genesis MINI Model 1, and I guess it's just so tiny because it comes with one 6-button controller. So I'll also compare the 6-button controller in here to my Retrobit controllers and see if it's any good. I'll also go over a comparison to both of these so you can decide which one you want, and they are very different. So I'll just get this out of the way. Let's check out the box art for all you collectors out there. The box is so tiny that if you put it on a shelf, it's not going to take up much real estate. And it just shows a console and a controller. There's no real Sonic characters or anything on the front, so it's pretty much the hardware Genesis art that you're showing off. Even the back has the games on one side that's really tiny because the box is so small, but there's even a label here that's slapped over the top of it. So it's not really going to look good on your shelf besides the front. The sides just say SEGA Genesis, so it's pretty minimalistic artwork. Okay, let's see what we get in the box here. So I will say that this box is a lot easier to get open than the first one that had all those weird tabs in it. So obviously you get your HDMI cable and power cable. Here's your USB 6-button controller, which I'm excited about. I'm going to compare this to my other ones. It's too bad that they didn't include 2 controllers, but Retrobit makes some really good ones if you want to check them out. I compared the cord length of these controllers, and the 6-button controller on the left has a 6-foot cable, which isn't so bad, and it'll probably still reach your couch, but just barely. The Retrobit's a lot longer. And last but not least, the SEGA console itself. I thought it'd be fun to do a size comparison, so here it is next to the Model 1 console. There's a 3-button and 6-button controller. But my awesome friend Selena Boland, who's an amazing musician, lent me her actual SEGA Genesis to do a size comparison for this, so thanks again. I'll link her music down in the description. You can check her out on Spotify, Facebook, or YouTube. She just has an amazing voice. And this is her Sonic game, and the box next to it as well, just so you can see the size difference. This thing is really tiny. Thanks again to Selena for letting me use her stuff. This is just so cool looking. And it was like that in real life too in the 90s, so it's pretty cool that they have both, and they're very different, so I'll get into that later. This is really nostalgic for me. I had this in my bedroom growing up. It was awesome. I used to play games like Columns and X-Men and Sonic and all kinds of amazing games that are on SEGA Genesis. One major difference you'll notice is you have to slide the power switch back and forth. This was on the SEGA Genesis MINI 1 console as well, but the real console, I remember you actually had to push the button down. Also, the reset button you have to push down on, just like the original. It has the same cartridge slot here that doesn't really work. It's just cool that they did this. Another thing that has always set this apart from the Model 1 is that it just says SEGA and the Genesis logo is on the top, but the Model 1 has the 16-bit and high-definition graphics on it, which is kind of funny. This even has the little cartridge input words here that I remember when I was a kid. They also have the Sega CD slot on the side. Not that it's functioning, but it's just a cool little detail, especially with the tabs down here. And you can get the Sega Tower Power in Japan as well as the Sega CD for the mini consoles, and it's just hilarious. But the fact that you get a bunch of Sega CD games on this console is awesome. And here's an actual list of the MINI 1 games and the MINI 2 games, so take a screenshot of this and read through them if you like. And on the back you got your HDMI and power ports. It has HDMI molded into the plastic. Okay, the nostalgia is real here. Now this is my Retrobit 6-button controller. It's actually the 8-button version because I got the 2 bumpers up here, but it doesn't matter if you get the 6 or 8-button, they're really good quality. So I'm going to compare it to the one that came with the Model 2 Mini and see if there's any real significant differences. The first real difference that I'm noticing between them is that the Y button on the mini console version of the 6-button controller has the 2 dots that are a lot more prominent than the Retrobit version. And you'll probably notice that my controllers have the mode button in the center. That's because I have the 2 extra bumpers on the top. The mode button on the actual 6-button controller is up here. So I have 2 Retrobit 8-button controllers, and what I'm noticing is that the buttons on these feel better than the one that came with the SEGA Genesis MINI Model 2. The SEGA Genesis MINI 6-button controller just has a softer D-pad. The D-pad on my Retrobit ones are a lot clickier. The buttons are overall pretty good. They feel about the same, but what I'm noticing about my 6-button controller is that my X button right here is sunken a little bit. It's not as raised as the other button, so that's probably just something wrong with mine. But I'd rather use the retrobit ones just because they just feel a bit better. It's decent if you just want to throw on the Sega and play some games and not have the hassle of getting other controllers. This will work for you just fine. The big thing about this mini console is you get a lot of different games compared to the first version that they released, and especially the Sega CD games, and M2 put out some different games and arcade ports that you can try out as well. There's 7 bonus original titles, but you can mod them and put your own games on there if you want to. I was pretty excited about this one. So let's plug the console in and see how it performs. I'm going to use the controller that came with it during the whole video just so I can see how it performs in the games. And yeah, the main menu music is a little bit underwhelming compared to the Model 1. Here's the Model 1 menu music, it's just so much cooler. I'll scroll through the games here so you can see the artwork, but keep in mind that you can see the spines of the games if you like. And when you click on these games, you'll get options on some of them, such as Space Harrier has number 1 and number 2. If you want to play the Japanese versions of the games, you can change the language to Japanese and you get a different menu as well. Under the screen settings, you can have the normal ratio, you can turn the CRT filter on and off, or stretch it. But I prefer just to keep it normal without the CRT filter. You can see on the left it kind of deadens the colors a bit, and I always find it a bit gimmicky, but at the same time I think it's cool that they do it anyway. There's a lot of different wallpapers you can choose for the background if you keep the normal ratio. I just like to keep mine on black. You might not know that both Sega Genesis consoles back in the 90s had different sounds. The Model 1 has more of a softer sound, so you can choose between those here. And you can program your mode button to do different things to bring up the menu. If you click the Y and Z button, you can change the different way you want to order the game, such as putting Sega CD first. Let's talk about the Sega CD games on here, because I just had so much fun playing these, and I never used to own a Sega CD and I never knew anyone with one, so this was a first time experience for me and I loved it. And the mood setting on some of these games reminded me of when I played PC games back in the 90s, such as Duke Nukem 3D, Doom, Star Wars Dark Forces, Rise of the Triad, and MechWarrior 2. I just love this era of gaming. And it seemed like on the Sega CD they were trying to do the same thing, and I just got really immersed in it. Just listen to this.
The survivors of the Galaxy Union and the Colony Planets fleet assembled all their forces to strike at Zacate. 64 light years lay across their way to the solar system.
But the mood setting, along with some great gameplay, just made me want to play this for hours on end. And I was just lost in the games. I filmed this on a Sunday afternoon, and I spent hours playing this thing. It was just so awesome. I mean, some games are better than others, but it really depends on what kind of games you like and what you're in the mood for. But this really brought me back to the 90s PC gaming and that kind of weird 3D era, but I don't know, I just got a soft spot for it, and it reminds me of a lot of the games that I used to play. Games like Virtua Racing I thought was really fun too. I mean, it's no Forza, but I had a lot of fun playing it anyway. And Space Harrier 2 was amazing, and the sprite scaling that they added to this console was really cool. And I got to see some logos for Sega and Sonic that I've never seen before. And playing some games that I used to play in the arcade, like Super Hang-On, was just a blast to play. And Outrunners 2 was nuts. I had a really intense race on that. It was a lot of fun. And I got to play a lot of games that I've never even heard of before, but they were awesome. This was an entirely different experience for me compared to the Model 1 Mini. I mean, you still got your classic games on here, like Earthworm Jim 2, but I'm now wishing that I knew saw it with a Sega CD back in the day because I had so much fun with this thing. It was amazing. And I will say that the 6-button controller performed great. I never had any issue at all, so I'd only recommend the Retrobit controller if you're looking for a second player. I would highly, highly recommend it. If you want one of these, Amazon US has them on for a little bit of a discount right now, but if you want it to ship to Canada, you have to make a Japanese Amazon account, which is exactly what I had to do, but it will ship from US to Canada. When I received mine, the Amazon box was just destroyed. It was basically just a tube for the product after that. But they actually packaged the Sega really well, so there was no damage, thankfully. I don't know how that happened, but hey, I'll take it. I have links to all this stuff down below in the description and the pinned comments, so you can get 8 buttons or 6 buttons from Retrobit, or you can just get the Genesis Mini versions, which will work fine as well. All the controllers are really good. Even the SEGA Genesis Mini 1 comes with 2 3-button controllers, and those 3-button controllers are really good. It's just if you're playing games like Street Fighter, you're better off getting one of these. And I have a full video on how to set up a 6-button controller on these mini consoles if you put RetroArch on there and add your own games. I have another video that reviews the Model 1 if you want to check it out. So feel free to share the video and like the video and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and take care.